It is 5:55. And the mind is the last temptation. 555 is a number of change. In this case, it may be a change of perspective. A change of his perspective of what life really is. And a change of perspective if you want to imagine what it's like to evolve from our current state of consciousness. And this current state of consciousness needs to evolve. Why does it need to evolve? Why do you have to give it meaning? Things evolve. Animals evolve. Our world evolved. Changes happened, and you look back at evolution. You look at you imagine the age of the dinosaurs, the various stages of dinosaurs, and how they evolved from bigger dinosaurs to smaller dinosaurs. And you realize that there really isn't a story of identity throughout those stages of evolution. You don't think back at those dinosaurs and then wonder, oh, I wonder if that daddy dinosaur forgot the female dinosaur's wedding anniversary or engagement, or if they had weddings. You don't think of them as conscious. Or you don't think of just them as something worthy of receiving a story and a persona. Kind of like you. Kind of like me. And so we speak into temptation and why that is relevant in this 555 of transformations and change of perspectives. It's because in this change of perspective, it was necessary to be said that this beautiful gift that we call life, the way we're able to experience it in our own unique way, be able to experience the good and the bad, the perceived good and the perceived bad, that experience is beautiful, but can only be experienced that way through the eye of someone that's forgotten. You see, there's still an observer, the one that watches, the one that's inside you that you recognize is the one that's knowing that things are here and happening at this second, this moment. You shift between knowing that you are here right now, alive at this second, sitting down, or just being, and not have a thought take over. A thought of the future or the present. And temptations, as I referred to earlier, it reminds me of the Christian Bible's story of the temptations of Christ. And I translate that today as sin, in other words, the ego, the mind, ego, mind, the self, that beautiful thing as we know it, as our identity, that thing is in itself the last temptation. To me, is the last temptation. The temptations of the Christ, they all signify the same thing. They signify, ultimately, we'll go with through each one, but ultimately I will tell you at the end why I call it, in my translation, that addiction to that identity is the final temptation. The only temptation. See, when the Christ was first tempted, he was tempted with bread. He was tempted with the attachment to life, to the bread, to the attachment to needing to stay alive and feeding yourself. The need for sustenance, for abusing the power for one's own selfish needs. That is still being in the state of unconsciousness. That is still being in the state of identity with self. And when he was tempted to jump out of the mountain, until Satan told him to jump, and that if he jumps, Scripture says that God would send his angels so his feet doesn't touch any rocks. It's also another temptation of abuse. A temptation of putting yourselves to the test constantly. The constant fear. And the constant desire to prove, to wanting answers, the constant desire to wanting answers to everything, not be ever satisfied. And so take that to the limit, you basically throwing your life into this thing just to prove something, that you're willing to give your life for that. You're willing to give your life to be proven, to go for an answer that you always want to ask. And then came the one of power. You see, this temptation wouldn't be called a temptation if it wasn't something that you wanted. And so Christ was offered all the kingdoms of the heavens, all the kingdoms of earth, all Rome and all the nations. And he said, if you make obeisance to me once, I will give you the power to all these things, and they'll all be yours. And it's interesting to understand that, again, there wouldn't be real temptations, ones perceived by God and perceived by Satan and the Christ, that there is and you lie in these offers. You see, Satan offers all these things not necessarily to fool you, but to tempt you for the reality that it is that here you are able to go and do these terrible things to all these people and subjugate them to your needs and to your wants. and you will take it to the most extreme, you are given so much responsibility, so much power, and you will abuse it. You will abuse it. And that is your nature. That is your nature as this ego that you are, this identity that you take a hold of. That is the same thing. Because life is so sacred that to step to the next stage of evolution is to abandon the attachment to all these things that make your identity. Your hunger, your greed, your desire for more, your desire for endless need for wanting to know why questions. Those things are all, when all said and done, false. There's no need for something to be given meaning, to be given a story. We flow through nature the same way that the dinosaurs that we spoke of earlier evolved over time. They didn't need an identity, an ego like we do. They were still going to grow, they were still going to eat, they were still going to sleep. Their needs will always be met, and they have no need to tell themselves a story. They just exist. They just are. But we here believe that we are different because we have this ability to be aware. And the thought of that disappearing is terrifying, isn't it? That is really what you're afraid of. Not death. No, you don't know what that is. But the idea that their awareness that you currently have right now would disappear completely, and that everything that you know would just cease to exist, that terrifies you. That idea terrifies you. And that is what makes you human. The fear is part of it. But I don't care if I'm overstepping here, but it's truth. If you do fear that, there is no need to fear that. That thing that you're afraid of losing, that is the only thing in you that is eternal. That thing that you're so afraid of losing when you die, that is what you are. You're not your story. You're more than that. You're not the story of me growing up poor or me growing up rich or me having a bad childhood, terrible parents. All these different stories are beautiful because they can be believed. And to be aware that they're happening, to be able to enjoy them, to be able to see them, to know that you're alive, that is so beautiful, so sacred. That is what basically, that's what you are in your essence. That was, if you want to believe it this way, that is what survives after you die. So it's just a shift in consciousness. It's an oscillation of it. That doesn't disappear, If I'm being honest, when I realized that my body was not real, that it was still no less sacred than a blade of grass, that it's still beautiful, of being part of everything, seeing everything, and realizing that Javier, James, Jesse, Joseph, Savannah, Sonia, Jessica, Lauren, no matter what you call yourself, that you are. The one that knows that these personas exist, that knowledge, that knowing, that awareness, that is eternal. That is beyond time. As a matter of fact, it shows that time is the illusion. And we're just a beautiful play of harmony. And I am grateful that I got to enjoy it as a human. that I've got to experience pain, loss, suffering, grief, anger, resentment, and then to be rewarded with, not rewarded, but then to experience the complete opposite of joy, bliss, understanding, love, knowing what unconditional love means and why it's so difficult for the ego. Well, guys, have a good weekend, and I hope that everybody enjoys this beautiful weather, or if it's bad weather for you guys, I hope you guys find shelter. Have a good night, everyone.